Hello, everybody. This is Robert Phoenix, broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas. And I'm just doing my best to stay with the program here. And when I mean stay with the program. Hello, everybody. This is Robert Phoenix. Hold on a second. I got some broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg, Texas. So when I say stay with the program, I mean the program being my health as I climb out of the cesspool, the cesspit of whatever this bug is. That is, apparently I'm not the only person who has been dealing with this nasty, nasty bug. Not happy about it. Not a happy camper, as they say. I'm going to try to just sync up here, see if I can get some real-time comments that are not being, how should I say, 1 second. 1 second. I'm going to get there. Give me 1 moment. Linking everything up here. Yeah, I'm live now. Okay. Yes, I'm live. Just want to see the chat room. And we get the volume off. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm just playing with some configurations here as we do the show. Well, welcome to the Friday FARcast. I'm your host, Robert Phoenix. And today we're going to get into some uncomfortable material. We're going to go down the rabbit hole a little bit. And we're going to talk about what's happening in California and some other trends. And what I'm going to try to do today is to connect a number of nodes and dots so that you can get a much larger picture as to what's going on. What I wanted to talk about is the idea of war. And we've been so accustomed to war being something that is fought on a battlefield or fought in a place of like open terrain, or in more modern terms, war has taken place in cities. If you go into the 1970s, 80s, 90s, places like Beirut, Baghdad, the outskirts of Damascus, war has taken on kind of an urban environment. Also in the Balkans, of course, there were cities where war was taking place. It's not just like some open field like Flanders or something like that, where people are moving forward to occupy territory. War is a very different beast and a very different creature in the 21st century. And what we're looking at is what's called asymmetric warfare. And it's warfare that is not, how shall I say this? That is not fought in a direct, linear fashion. So what I'm going to read to you is the definition of asymmetric warfare so that you can get a better idea as to what that means. Let me go here. This is from the this is from dictionary.com, so it's going to be a fairly fundamental definition of asymmetric warfare. It says warfare in which opposing groups or nations have unequal military resources and the weaker opponent uses unconventional weapons and tactics as terrorism to exploit the vulnerabilities of the enemy. Well, that's one version of it. You don't have to have a lesser amount of munitions, arms, or resources to stage an asymmetric war. You could have plenty of arms and plenty of resources. So here's another definition of asymmetric warfare. Asymmetric warfare is a war between belligerents whose relative military power differs significantly, or whose strategy or tactics differ significantly. This is typically a war between a standing professional army and an insurgency or resistance movement militias who often have status of unlawful combatants. All right, that's another definition. What we're talking about with asymmetric war is that it's unconventional, that war does not adhere to a certain stereotype where there are tanks going down the street or there are jets flying overhead and firing off missiles and bombs and, you know, the stuff that we've been accustomed to. No, I'm talking about a very different kind of war, a very different set of tactics. There was a document that was uncovered many, many years ago, and the document is called Silent Weapons for a Quiet War. And it was apparently found on a copy machine that was being sold in the Washington, D.C. area. So one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to read to you some of the talking points for silent weapons for a quiet war. And apparently this was put together. Let's see, hold on, I'm going to find the right one. Okay. All right. One of the authors, supposedly, was William Shockley, who is a renowned eugenicist and was one of the founders of Silicon Valley. So I'm going to read you something here. This is from syti.net, and I think I can do screen share today. So let me get into some screen share, so you guys can jump into screen share land with me. 1 sec. So where are we? Let me get this up and running here. Okay, hold on 1 sec. Bada boom. How is everybody today? I'm feeling rather low key. I'm telling you, man, this bug thing is bugging me. Bug thing is bugging me big time. All right, so let's get back into share screen so you guys can see what I'm talking about. There we go. Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, an introductory programming manual, operations research, technical manual TM SW7905.1. This publication marks the 25th anniversary of the Third World War, called the Quiet War, being conducted using subjective biological warfare fought with silent weapons. This book contains an introductory description of the war, its strategies, and weaponries. So we're going to just go through a few of these things because there's a lot going on here. There's a whole lot. Okay. So here we go. This is the theoretical introduction. Give me control over a nation's currency, and I care not who makes it. That's Meyer Amschel Rothschild. That is a direct quote. 1743 to 1812. Today's silent weapons, technologies, and outgrowth of a simple idea covered succinctly expressed and effectively applied by the quoted Mr. Meyer Amschel Rothschild. Mr. Rothschild discovered the missing passive component of economic theory known as economic inductance. He, of course, did not think of his discovery in these 20th century terms. And to be sure, mathematical analysis had to wait for the Second Industrial Revolution. the rise of the theory of mechanics and electronics, and finally the invention of the electronic computer before it could be effectively applied in the control of world economy. Now, the Rothschilds owned PG&E in California, Pacific Gas and Electric. And PG&E has been fairly tied to the hip with these ongoing fires. And we talked about how PG&E was going to ratchet down electricity in areas that might have severe winds or severe weather patterns. They were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and that was ahead of the Paradise Fire. And let's be clear, these are, I don't use the word wildfire now. These are not wildfires. When you look at the buildings that have been hit by these fires, they're completely incinerated. They're burned to the ground. There's absolutely nothing left. Glass, which has a melting point of 2,600 to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit, actually melts under the heat. What fires get that hot? I mean, these are some pretty serious ass fires. So I'm not using the word wildfire. These are not wildfires at all. There's something very sinister going on in the state of California, and it's part of a broad spectrum insurgency that's being, I believe, staged against not just the people of the United States, but the people of the planet, you know, the people of this earth. And even the people, like, for instance, I'm going to take just a brief digression here. Even the people who are being imported from places like sub-Saharan Africa, Somalia, Mali, and bringing them into Europe, right? There's been a war going on against those people for a very long time. Very long time. I mean, we've all known and seen the Hollywood films that have romanticized and, you know, made heroic statements out of the war in Somalia in the 1990s and Mogadishu and all that stuff. I'm talking about Black Hawk Down. Yeah, there have been wars going on in Africa for a large part of the 20th century. And it's usually one warlord against another. There's a lot of chaos. There's always somebody new coming in to run a country. Meanwhile, the NGOs come in and the United States government goes in and corporations go in and they start to take over the resources. And this has been a plan ever since Africa became decolonized. Once Africa became decolonized, it's been in a state of perpetual chaos and in a state of perpetual, in its own right, war. And so now what we have is we have people who are the remnants of an ongoing war, essentially, that's been perpetrated against them and now being used as a front for an entirely different war, which is now taking place in the European theater. And to not see it in these terms would be beyond myopic. You know, this is not about the rise and fall of markets and, you know, the markets flexing its muscles and sort of this, you know, kind of Lockean organic theory about markets and the downside of this kind of relationship with these, you know, market forces, which are kind of these organic entities and forces unto themselves. No, it's not that way at all, because these are all mediated environments. These are situations that have been created over and over and over again, and in many cases have become quite hellish. So while I'm not in favor of the forced UN migration plan at all, it's also really important to understand that these people who are being moved into Europe have been essentially at the other end of their own struggle against these titanic, oligarchic, and multinational forces. This is what's been happening. And so, yeah, they're kind of the dregs of a war that's already been going on. And what's happening now is that war is spreading outward. And the war has been constant on the third world for a number of years, centuries, not centuries. Well, yeah, we could go back to centuries, but let's just say decades. It's been once the West realized that there were immense resources to be gained from colonization, and not always, having kind of free and fair trade. That's when things started to get heavy and things started to get dirty, and it's been going on for a long time. And now what's happening is that model is being kind of reconstituted and is being directed now towards North America and Europe. So now the entire planet, for the most part, with the exception of a few countries that manage to stay out of the fray, is now going, a lot of the planet is now going to be subject to what's been going on in third world countries for decades. So this is what's taking place. All right, I'll read this here. Mr. Rothschild's energy discovery. What Mr. Rothschild discovered was the basic principle of power, influence, control over people as applied to economics. We all know the story of the central banks, right? We all know that story. The principle is when you assume the appearance of power, people soon give it to you. It's true. It's absolutely true. Mr. Rothschild had discovered that currency or deposit loan accounts had the required appearance of power that could be used to induce people, inductance with people corresponding to a magnetic field. Remember last week I was talking about frequency, and I was talking about frequency of events, which eventually becomes a frequency unto itself. And that frequency connects into us, into a specific kind of way, into surrendering their real wealth in exchange for a promise of greater wealth instead of real compensation. Two different things. They would put up real collateral in exchange for promissory notes. Mr. Rothschild found that he could issue more notes than he had backing for, so long as he had someone stop gold as a persuader to show his customers. The old Fort Knox trick. Mr. Rothschild loaned his promissory notes to individual and to governments. These would create overconfidence. Then he would make more money scarce, tighten control of the system, and collect the collateral through the obligation of contracts. It's like, okay, pay up. You got a promissory note here, you got to pay up. The cycle was then repeated. These pressures could be used to ignite a war. Then he would control the availability of currency to determine who would win the war. It's going on forever. The government, which agreed to give him control of its economic system, got his support. Collection of debts was guaranteed by economic aid to the enemy of the debtor. The profit derived from his economic methodology made Mr. Rothschild all the more able to expand his wealth. He found that the public greed would allow currency to be printed by government order beyond the limits, which means inflation, of backing in precious metal or the production of goods and services, which is clearly what we're dealing with here, not only in this country, but the entire planet. And let's face it, the entire planet is insolvent. So paper as inductor, apparent capital as paper as inductor. In this structured credit presented as a pure element called currency has the appearance of capital, but is in effect negative capital, hence the appearance of service, but is in fact indebtedness or debt. It is therefore an economic inductance instead of an economic capacitance. Understand that? You're being inducted into something versus something that holds a charge. And if balanced in no other way, it will be balanced by the negation of population, war, or genocide. The total goods and services represent real capital, called the gross national product, and currency may be printed up to this level and still represent economic capacitance. The currency printed beyond this level is subtractive, represents the introduction of economic inductance, and constitutes notes of indebtedness. War is therefore the balancing of the system by killing the true creditors of the public, which we have taught to exchange true value for inflated currency, and falling back on whatever is left of the resources of nature and regeneration of those resources. Mr. Rothschild had discovered that currency gave him the power to rearrange the economic structure to his own advantage, to shift economic inductance to those economic positions, which would encourage the greatest economic instability and oscillation. And then he would then take advantage of that. It's predatory. Right? The final key to the economic model economic control, had to wait until there was sufficient data and high-speed computing equipment to keep close watch on the economic oscillations created by price shocking and excess paper energy credits, which is paper inductance/inflation. So we're going to skip this. Well, why don't we just go through this a little? This is kind of interesting. So these are general energy concepts. In the study of energy systems, there always appears three elementary concepts. There are potential energy. These are potential energy, kinetic energy, and energy dissipation. And corresponding to these concepts, there are three idealized, essentially pure physical counterparts called passive components. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of potential energy is associated with a physical property called elasticity or stiffness, and it can be represented by stretching a spring. In electronic science, potential energy is stored in a capacitor instead of a spring. This property is called capacitance instead of elasticity or stiffness. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of kinetic energy is associated with a physical property called inertia or mass, and it can be represented by a mass or a flywheel in motion. In electronic science, kinetic energy is stored in an inductor in a magnetic field instead of a mass. This property is called inductance instead of inertia. In the science of physical mechanics, the phenomenon of energy dissipation is associated with a physical property called friction or resistance, and can be represented by a dashpot or other device which converts energy into heat. In electronic science, dissipation of energy is performed by an element called either a resistor or a conductor. The term resistor being the one generally used to describe a more ideal device, wire employed to convey electronic energy efficiently from one location to another. The property of a resistance or conductor is measured as either resistance or conductance reciprocals. In economics, these three concepts are associated with economic capacitance: capital, money, stock, inventory, investments, and buildings, durables. Economic conductance, goods, production, flow, coefficients. And economic inductance, services, the influence of the population of industry or output. So eventually what happens, right, is that the aviation field provides the greatest evolution in the economic engineering field by way of a mathematical theory of shock testing. This process of projectiles fired from an airframe on the ground, and the impulse of the recoil is monitored by vibration transducers connected to the airframe and wired to chart recorders. By studying these echoes or reflections of the recoil impulse in the airframe, it is possible to discover critical vibrations in the structure of the airframe, which either vibrations of the engine or aeolian vibrations of the wings, or a combination of the two, might reinforce, resulting in resonant self-destruction of the airframe in flight as an aircraft. From the standpoint of engineering, this means that the strengths and weaknesses of the structure of the airframe in terms of vibrational energy can be discovered and manipulated. So that's about applying shock to something and watching where the reverberations take place. By the way, this is one of the theories and practices of Trump's art of the deal. This is what he's done in the past, which is basically go into a room and throw a bomb into the middle of the room and watch how people react and see where the resistance is or see where the vulnerability is. So it's basically the same thing. So here's the application in economics. If you use this method of airframe shock testing in economic engineering, the prices of commodities are shocked and the public consumer reaction is monitored, like for instance with oil. The resulting echoes of the economic shock are interpreted theoretically by computers, and the psychoeconomic structure of the economy is thus discovered. This is going on all the time. We're reading this stuff all the time, right? It is by this process that partial differential and difference matrices are discovered that define the family household and make possible its evaluation as an economic industry, which is a dissipative consumer structure. Then the response of the household to future shocks can be predicted and manipulated. Then society becomes a well-regulated animal with its reins under control of a sophisticated, computer-regulated social energy bookkeeping system. So a lot of what we see based on the marketplace is a series of shocks that occur. Again, it's kind of this idea that we're being traumatized either through our news, our media, our personal experience, or in this case, economic and market trends or economic and market disruptions. Eventually, every individual element of the structure comes under computer control through a knowledge of personal preferences, such knowledge guaranteed by Computer Association of Consumer Preferences, which is the UPC, Zebra Stripe, pricing codes, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. When you buy something, they swipe it, and if it's on your debit card, you're paying with your debit card, it goes into a data bank of what you purchase. And a profile is created around who you are, what you purchase, how often you purchase it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? With identified consumers identified with the use of credit card or latent permanent tattoo, body number, invisible, right? Okay, so they're talking about what's coming, which is tattoo chip organ. And I'm going to talk about that today, by the way, because there's some very interesting developments that are starting to emerge around that. All right, let me keep talking here. So the Harvard Economic Research Project, this was an extension of World War II operations research. Okay, so its purpose was to discover the science of controlling an economy at the first American economy, and then at first the American economy, then the world economy. It was felt that with sufficient mathematical foundation and data, be ready, or nearly as easy to predict and control the trend of an economy, to predict and control the trajectory of a projectile. So they could track basically the two in the same fashion. Okay, such has proven to be the case. Moreover, the economy has been transformed into a guided missile on target. The immediate aim of the Harvard projects, this was it started in 1948, was to discover the economic structure, what forces change that structure, how the behavior of that structure can be predicted, and how it can be manipulated. What was needed was a well-organized knowledge of the mathematical structure of interrelationships of investment, production, distribution, and consumption. To make a short story of it all, it was discovered that an economy obeyed the same laws as electricity, and that all the mathematical theory and practical and computer know-how developed for the electronic field could be applied directly to the study of economics. This discovery was not openly declared, and its more subtle implications were kept a closely guarded secret. For example, that in an economic model, human life is measured in dollars, and that the electric spark generated when opening a switch connected to an active inductor is mathematically analogous to the initiation of war. Let me just read that again. When an electric spark generated by the opening of a switch connected to an active inductor is mathematically analogous to the initiation of war. So when we look at what's going on in California, what is really happening there? Are these fires wildfires, Are they happening of their own accord? You know, PG&E is now taking quote unquote responsibility over the fact that their power stations either malfunctioned or failed. In which case, there have already been lawsuits that have been filed by the people of Paradise, California, for PG&E's claims. Now, this may be a runaround or ruse that PG&E is using to really deflect away from the true source or the true application of what's taking place with these fires, which, by the way, is equivalent to an electric spark generated when opening a switch connected to an active inductor, which is mathematically analogous to the initiation of war. Something electrical is happening with these fires. Something, whether it's a direct energy weapon, whether it has to do with the fact that there are smart meters that might be somehow correlated either through targeting, or there could be, who knows what's inside the smart meter, that it could, I don't know, amplify what's going on. I mean, we're in an area now where we're scrambling very quickly to get some expertise, very, very quickly, to kind of understand what's going on with these fires. Because whether they're DEWs or whether they're microwave transmitted, the whole thing is so bizarre and anomalous. When you see the pictures of businesses that are, or not, homes that are completely gutted, and then you'll see trees next to it, and you'll see another. Here, let's see if we can find some. We'll come back to this. Let me get back into, let me stop sharing the screen here. Let me see if I can find us some good photos here. Let's do Paradise. Let's do 1,000 folks. Yeah. See if we can run in on some of these structures here. I know a lot of you have seen them, and I know you know what I'm talking about. Give me 1 sec. I'll find a good one. All right. Let's look at this picture right here. This is an interesting picture. This begins to sort of touch on what I was wanting to bring to the table here. Give me 1 sec. Let's do this. Here we go. So the bottom line here is that we have entered into a phase where I don't think people can really comprehend what's taking place now and what we're up against. Because if we look at it from, if we were to put all of it together, and we were to look at the fires and the hurricanes and the forced waves of migration and the shootings, false flag, psychological operative shootings, and the voter theft, and the ongoing onslaught or not the onslaught, but the ongoing conflict between the left and the right. We can look at this as essentially an asymmetric war. Here we go. This is what I wanted to show you. I'm going to show you. I went to a different website. Let me show you some of these photos here. Just 1 second. All right. So I'm going to do a little share screen. You guys. Do this again. It's one of my new favorite websites, this Millennium Report. All right, so check this out. Look at this. What the hell is going on here? You see that? You have some cars are just fine, and you have these other cars that are on fire, and this car over here already looks like it's been hit by an atomic bomb. Can you see where the glass is gone? Glass melts at 2,600 to 3,000 degrees. That glass is gone. And it's gone in all these cars, right? What the hell's going on with this? See this? On one side, you've got a perfect farm. You got your little percolation pond. Probably have some ducks splashing around there. And over here, it's the freaking dark side of the moon. But even in this, you'll see that there are certain trees that are like, they're still standing. Here you go. What about this? Look at this. Street's intact. This house is intact, but these houses look like they've been just completely vaporized. And oh, by the way, the lawns are fine. Then we have all these majestic eucalyptus trees lining both sides of the street. This one's a trip. Look at this. Look at this. What is it? I think this might be a Kmart, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, you got trees here. They're fine, right? But this place is leveled and from the inside out. I mean, it's charred. There's nothing left. Here you go. Should we still call it a forest fire if the forest doesn't burn? I'm not calling it a forest. I'm not even calling it a wildfire. Look at this. So you have all these structures. They're gone. You know, it's almost like, you remember how we used to talk about how the neutron bomb would just, it would basically evaporate people, leave everything intact. Maybe this is like a lesser cousin of the neutron. But look, all these trees are just fine. But these places, they're history. This is another view of what we saw before, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. But look at that. This is insane. This is totally insane. Meanwhile, all these trees are just fine. How does this happen? We're in new territory, folks. Here we go. Trees, trees, trees. If you're an environmentalist, you love this. Well, look, trees live, but those pesky humans in their places, they're gone. Don't have to worry about them. Look at this. How do you explain this? I'd love to have some scientist explain this. I mean, it's like, how does that happen? I would love to watch that in person. So here's the soccer field. Look at this. It's burned. It's a soccer baseball field. Here, straight line. Look at this. The only thing it needs is a right angle. How does this happen? Over here, nothing. Again, Trees, fine, trees, fine. We got some cindering going on over here, but this person's house is decimated, gone. It's like bombs. It's like bombs went off in these places. Here's another example. Look at this. Trees, 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 trees. Neighborhood's gone. See you later. Look at this. Trees here, trees here. Nothing's happened to them. Somebody explain this to me. This is kind of mind-blowing. So here we go. Here's another look at that property we saw before, right down the middle. Larger area, nothing, leveled to the ground. The trees are still standing. And I'm sure a couple of trees got lost along the way. But really, everything should be. But look at this. I mean, this is incredible. I mean, it is incredible. I mean, this is just freaking mind-blowing. Forest fire that melts steel and levels homes but leaves trees. Sounds legit. There you go. You got nothing left there. And here's this famous picture. I can't attest to the validity of this picture. I'm sure some of you have seen it. But it's one of these images where there's death rays coming down from the skies. Look at this shit right here. Look at this. How does this happen? Tree's fine. I mean, it's parked right next to the tree. And it is, there's nothing left of these vehicles. Another example, look at this. So this thing was just like, it was just blown right off the road, like hit with significant force, right? I'm telling you, we are seeing things that we've never seen before. Maybe we've seen them with 9/11. Some of this stuff reminds me of 9/11, but this is pretty intense. Okay, here's what I'm talking. Look at this thing. This is in paradise. There's nothing here. That glass is gone, and everything is just melted, completely melted. And glass melts at 2,600 to 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. Think how hot these fires must be. Here we go, got a transformer catching fire. There was firing down there, but the trees still stay intact. Here we go. Yeah. What's this? A chemtrail in the sky? That's what it looks like, huh? Here's another picture of that shopping. It looks like it might have been a Kmart or a Costco or something, or Walmart. Look at this, just complete devastation. Everything else is fine. Fine. This is from an older fire. This is this tree. This is something from about a year ago. This guy was getting out of one of the Northern California fires. The trees burned from the inside out. From the inside out. Does this make sense to you at all? I mean, maybe because it's been hollowed out by the bark beetle, perhaps. But from the inside out, usually trees burn from the outside in. There we go. Here's another example. Inside out. Something, we're dealing with something that is, this is not your typical average fire. Sorry. Look at this. The devastation is just absolutely brutal. I mean, again, I just keep looking at these pictures thinking it looks like a bomb went off. You know, trees all the way around it still. Check this one out. Look at this. Leveled. And all these places are intact. Could you imagine living across the street and you just wake up and you go, what the fuck? What just happened? And I have to think, you know, are we next? Did this happen to us? Here's another place. Got it. This is like one of the winery fires. Winery's fine. Trees are fine. Oh, what do we have here? Little zippity doodah coming down from the sky. How about that? Somebody caught that. Here we go. More trees. Well, these look pretty singed. I do have to say, but there's nothing left. I mean, there's absolutely nothing left. Like if you wanted to just go through here and you know, put a railway going through here, you wouldn't have to do a whole lot, would you? I mean, this place has been massively cleared. It's like, you know, you just bring in a bulldozer or two and you just start moving stuff around, and next thing you know, this whole thing has been just cleared away because there's not much work to do to move any of the debris out. Here you go. More trees. No buildings. Again, look at the foliage. It just seems to be a common theme. Somebody had a nice little place here and it's just gone. G-O-N-E. Gone. Done. Northern California. More than 160,000 acres of burn. Burned cars, trees have leaves. This poor woman. How do you wrap your head around this? I mean, it's mind-boggling. It's absolutely mind-boggling because look around. Got a building here, you got trees here. Meanwhile, a lot of cars taken out. Mind-blowing shit. Look at that. You know what's really ironic is that there was a movie that came out a few months ago called Geostorm. It's one of these disaster movies where the weather is used as a weapon, and it stars Gerard Butler, and he just lost his house in Malibu. Okay, look at this. There's just nothing left. This is interesting. Plastic is a microwave safe material. How about that? Everything else is gone. The little slide is still up. Trees are still up. Here's another photo that looks like something being zapped from the sky, hitting something below. Anomalies, high atmospheric anomalies in the clouds. Now, I don't know about this photo. Okay, I just don't know about this photo. I can't validate this photo. But you know, given the state of what we're looking at or dealing with here, I'm thinking it's out of the question that something like this might exist. I mean, this could be photoshopped. But that gives you an idea as to what's going on and what these people are, you know, people are waking up now. I've been watching some videos. People in California are starting to wake up. They're starting to figure out that something here is not right. Right? Mr. Jones. Where's the chat experience? Where are we in the chat room? Let's see. I got it's utterly ridiculous, New York Times. Let's see what we got here. Natural fires don't look like that. It is. Absolutely. The United States is under attack. The world is under attack. For plastic 14, let's see, plastic solid, a hot day never melts. There's hell on earth. Well, they certainly burned paradise to the ground, didn't they? The amount of the fuel and temperature of the fire, most of those homes would have burned inside out for that kind of shielding to the trees. Good call. Natural fires don't look like that. That's right, they don't. Joan Buriano, who I really like, that guy's great, said that the refrigerators now use liquefied petroleum gas as coolant, which can be remotely ignited by your smart meter and blow your house down. Wow, that is a mind blower. Thank you for sharing that, Equicentric. If you don't follow Joe and Brianna over on the Fulton Informant, you should do that. The guy's very informed. That's so the smart meters are playing a role here. Kathy Warner Leap, I'm in Santa Rosa. Hi, Kathy, nice to see you. Fires 100 miles away to the north, 5 miles to the south. It is the same fake fire that we lived through. Now Bay Area air is the worst in the world. Schools are closed. That's right. I got an email alert from the city of Albany, and they've closed the schools in the city of Albany. That's Albany, California, not Albany, New York. So I wanted to just bring that to your attention because there is a war going on. And people don't understand this right now. And it's escalated. It's been happening for a while, but the volume just got turned up. And we're dealing with this now. And we're in a new, this is a very new critical phase of where we are. Part of this ultimately is about Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030. We know that. You know, to move people into highly concentrated areas of, you know, quote unquote green living. And this is why, in a lot of ways, the nationalist or the populist movement has become so powerful. Let me give you another example of, you know, the type of war that we're witnessing. Is that the people in Britain wanted to resume their nationalist identity. They wanted their country back. And after they voted for that, with the amendments, the Brexit referendum, Theresa May basically was kind of given power in England, and she's basically sold the rights away of the British back to the EU. It's like the deal that they created essentially still makes the British people in England part of the EU by a series of contracts and agreements. So even in that instance, when the people said, hey, you know, we want to have something different, we want to have this back, they were totally betrayed by their leadership and made sure that that wasn't going to happen. We've been seeing it in this country with the elections here in the United States, as election or seat after seat, which was tightly contested, has been flipped in the aftermath of the election based on new votes that were introduced in a number of elections. We talked about Cinema yesterday, I believe, but it's taking place in Georgia. This woman, Abrams, is determined to win. Now she wants to have another election. And, you know, this is another form of an attack or a war that's going on against us. It's a war that's, and look, and I'm not here to back any of the Republican candidates that won their seats or whatever. That's not what I'm here to do. But technically speaking, they won. And now there's been a major push to remove them and basically introduce new ballots that are coming through and proclaim new winners. We already saw that with Cinema in Arizona. There's a couple of other candidates. So this is another version of what's happening. And so we're having all these different vectors come together right now. And the one part that is really, I think, sort of the linchpin with all of this are the shooting psyops. These are, I think, perhaps the most important in a lot of ways. Because one of the things that ultimately will happen with that is, of course, the particularly with the guns. And once the guns are gone, and I'm not a gun nut, and you know, I've often said this. I don't even own a gun, okay, but I clearly support the right to own a gun. That's important, and because for whatever, I mean, it might be a minor bit of leverage. It's still a bit of leverage, right, against what I see now are these forces that are really, you know, bringing a lot of heat, literally and figuratively, into our system. And to think that we're not dealing with what's going on here, which is an attack on humanity. It is an attack on humanity. And certainly it's an attack on this country. You're just not paying attention. Yeah, I'm seeing people wake up in California, seeing people wake up around the fires in a big way. And, you know, I watched a video this morning, this gal who lives in near Paradise, and she, you know, figured it out. You know, she figured it out. She's a middle-aged woman, doesn't have any real, never really had any skin in the game, Christian, but now she's seeing things in a very, very personal way since she lost her house and starting to connect dots. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens with the people in California. Now, one of the things that we saw is we saw this event at the Borderline bar and the shooting which took place. And almost immediately, right on the heels of that shooting, we have the fires in Thousand Oaks. So what are the odds of that? So first of all, what do you think the odds are that the people who were at Las Vegas, the Las Vegas event a year ago, would wind up at a bar where there was another shooting? What do you think the odds of that are? They're tremendous. They're like 1 in 5 million. I mean, seriously, that's how crazy the odds are. And what do you think the odds would be that right after that shooting, that there would be a tremendous fire that would grab our attention, displace people, and create extremely bad air quality? I would say the odds are probably pretty much in the same category. And it didn't allow people much time to really get in and deal with the Borderline event, right? The Borderline event just got, you know, signed, sealed, letter, done. Let's move on to the fires, right? Could we say that there was no coincidence there? I would say there's probably no coincidence at all. That it was manufactured to misdirect and move people's attention away from that event to another event and essentially bury it. So this is what we're dealing with now. And we're going to have to be really, really aware, very aware. Well, what kind of world awaits us? What kind of world are they cooking up for us? Well, I found some interesting posts here. This is something that this all has to do with biometrics and where things are headed. Do this. Here we go. Find this thing. Let me share a screen with you on this. This is where it's all headed. Okay, I got these two lined up. I'm going to segue from one to the other. Okay. Sorry, I don't have a ton of energy today because I'm still dealing with this. This bug. All right. So let's share a little screen here. This is from Business Insider. Venezuela is rolling out a new ID card manufactured in China that can track, reward, and punish citizens. This is interesting. With this card, we're going to do everything from now on. I'm very happy about that card. Venezuela is rolling out a new smart card ID known as the Carnet de la Patria, or the Fatherland card. And this card is manufactured by ZTE, which is a Chinese telecom. The ID transmits data about cardholders to government computers and is increasingly linked to subsidized food, health, and other social programs most Venezuelans rely on to survive. Well, the idea with Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 is to get people to rely on a very, very powerful centralized government, which will provide for them. Okay. The Fatherland card, what a name, the Fatherland. The Fatherland card critics argue, illustrates how China, through state-linked companies like ZTE, exports technological know-how that can help like-minded governments track, reward, and punish citizens. Here's the story. In April 2008, former Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez dispatched military justice ministry officials to visit counterparts of the Chinese technology hub of Shenzhen. Their mission, according to a member of the Venezuela delegation, was to learn the workings of China's national identity card program. Chavez, a decade into his self-styled socialist revolution, wanted to help provide ID credentials to the millions of Venezuelans who still lack basic documentation needed for tasks like voting or opening a bank account. Once in Shenzhen, though, the Venezuelans realized a card could do far more than just identify the recipient. There at the headquarters of the Chinese telecom giant ZTE Corp, they learned how China, using smart cards, was developing a system that would help Beijing track social, political, and economic behavior. This goes back to the first piece I was talking about with the silent weapons for a quiet war and tracking the reverberations of economic behavior and then modeling, right? What we saw in China changed everything, said the member of the Venezuelan delegation, technical advisor Anthony Daquin. His initial amazement, he said, gradually turned to fear that such a system could lead to abuses by Venezuela's privacy by Venezuela's government. They were looking to have citizen control. The following year, when he raised concerns with Venezuelan officials, Daquin told Reuters he was detained, beaten, and extorted by intelligence agents. They knocked out several teeth with a handgun and accused him of treasonous behavior, Daquin said, prompting him to flee the country. Government spokespeople had no comment on Daquin's account. Project languished. But 10 years after the Shenzhen trip, Venezuela is rolling out a new smart card ID known as the Carnet de la Patria, or the Fatherland card. The ID transmits data about cardholders to computer servers. The card is increasingly linked by the government to subsidize food, health, and other social programs most Venezuelans rely on to survive. And ZTE, whose role in the Fatherland project is detailed here for the first time, is at the heart of the project. As part of a $70 million government effort to bolster national security, Venezuela last year hired ZTE to build a Fatherland database. and create a mobile payment system for use with the card, according to contracts reviewed by Reuters. A team of ZTE employees is now embedded in a special unit within CANTV, the Venezuelan state telecommunications company, that manages the database, according to 4 current and former CANTV employees. The fatherland card is troubling some citizens and human rights groups who believe it is a tool for Chavez's successor, President Nicolas Maduro, to monitor the populace and allocate scarce resources to his loyalists. It's blackmail, Hector Navarro, one of the founders of the ruling Socialist Party and former minister under Chavez, said of the fatherland program. Venezuelans with the cards now have more rights than those without. And so now you get the rights, and the people that don't have the cards, so how do we get the card? And they want in. In a phone interview, Su Qingfeng, the head of ZTE's Venezuelan, confirmed ZTE sold Caracas servers for the database and developing the mobile payment application. The company, he said, violated no Chinese or local laws and has no role in how Venezuela collects or uses cardholder data. We don't support the government, he said. We're just developing our market. He knows what they're going to do with that shit. Come on. So this is Maduro with Xi Jinping. And that was in 2013, September 22nd. An economic meltdown in Venezuela is causing hyperinflation, widespread shortages of food and medicines, and a growing exodus of desperate citizens. Maduro has been sanctioned by the United States and is criticized by governments from France to Canada as increasingly autocratic, meaning he's just doing what other politicians do and being brazen and bold and outward about what he's doing. And that critics say Maduro has an ally, the fatherland card, they argue, illustrates how China, through state-linked companies like ZTE, exports technological know-how that can help like-minded governments track, reward, and punish citizens. The database, according to employees of the card system, and screenshots of user data reviewed by Reuters, stores such details as birthdays, family information, employment, income, property owned, medical history, state benefits, presence on social media, membership of a political party, and whether a person voted. So far, the government's disclosure of ZTE's involvement in the Fatherland Project has been limited to a passing reference in a February 2017 press release, credited the company with helping to fortify the underlying database. Venezuela's government didn't respond to requests for comment for this article. Nadia Perez, spokesman for CANTV, the state-run telecoms firm, declined to comment, and Manuel Fernandez, the company's president, didn't respond to emails or text messages from Reuters. China's Justice Ministry and its embassy in Caracas didn't respond to requests for comments. So you have to ask yourself, right? Could that ever happen in the United States? Question mark. Would people in this country allow for such an ID card and a social credit system to take place? No, it's a good question. Maybe this article has an answer for us. Here we go. National Facial Recognition Database to use loyalty rewards to identify American shoppers. For years, I've been warning people about facial recognition in retail stores. This story might convince you to avoid retail stores altogether. A recent article in Biometric Update, BU, reveals that retail stores have a master plan to convince Americans to accept facial biometrics. BU interviewed 4 facial biometric company CEOs, and what they revealed is frightening. The article starts off innocuously enough by telling us that US retail biometrics is used primarily in loss prevention. Things quickly take a turn for the worse. BU's interview with Face First CEO Peter Tripp is especially disconcerting, as he reveals how retailers plan to use facial recognition opt-in environment. This is the quote. There is another step, though, that exists. which has more to do with consumer loyalty and consumer experience, that is not quite as expensive an endeavor. And I think there are lots of folks looking at ways of doing that in a friendly opt-in environment where privacy is not the cornerstone issue. Hey, there's Mark Devlin. How about that? And there's Dmitry Ivanov. Let's play this. Maybe you guys can see this on the screen share. Let's see what happens.
Stop retail crime before it happens, and knowing the moment to help the furniture your store. Will you avoid a potentially dangerous situation? And what if you know about the presence of violent criminals before they act? And what if you could easily identify missing children?
The child angle.
Face first, you can stop crime before it starts. The world's only patented enterprise retail face recognition platform could dramatically reduce crime and perform flawlessly across thousands of locations, making it the top choice for big box stores, department stores, grocery stores, pharmacies, and other retail operations. Reduce shrink, safer stores, and fast ROI, all in one turnkey solution. Learn more at FARcast.com.
There you go. So it's sold as a security measure. You want to make sure that those bad people in your store get identified very, very quickly. And it's pre-crime, right? If you can identify somebody who has a record or is dubious or has some kind of, strange or suspicious kind of behavior mark on their record, you just escort them out of the store, right? It's pre-crime. Here we go. Let's read a little more of this. Biometric companies are trying to convince Americans to accept digital driver's licenses by tying them to loyalty rewards programs. Last year, the Lincoln Motor Company installed complimentary TSA pre-check biometric scanners in all their new vehicles so customers can get through airport and sports stadium check-in lines quicker in their vehicles. Because it's so important to be able to skirt those lines. According to a recent ZDNet article, a new partnership between SureID, a biometric fingerprinting company, and Robbie.ai, a facial recognition company, could create a national biometric database. Adding facial recognition from Robbie.ai gives the two firms the building blocks of a nationwide biometric database that could be used in a number of settings, from retail authentication and employment verification to more speculative applications like driver identification with keyless self-driving cars, or even user recognition in future robotic platforms. As technology emerges and companies adopt more sophisticated forms of security, it will be crucial for safety, of course, and security to authenticate the real identity of technicians and consumers. Like, it hasn't been that hard. Like, we've been okay for a while now, right? I mean, there's more security equal more safety. I don't believe that. Who.ai CEO Arturo Flack said once companies are using this type of technology for crime prevention purposes, there's no reason why they should not be using it for upselling their customers. So here we go. Let's skip this. Sensible Vision CEO George Borostoff sees customer loyalty rewards as the next logical step in the U.S. and good in the U.S. and Good Intelligence founder Alan Good sees a huge potential for biometric customer loyalty programs. Good also thinks retail facial recognition should be used for age verification in self-checkout systems. So you won't have to deal with the, the gnarly looking person who's checking you out. Just, it'll be facial recognition. Right? Falk said, loyalty rewards can be used to convince the public that facial recognition is not that bad. Convenience is the Antichrist. It is a way for the business to turn what could potentially be bad public relations into engagement opportunities. Okay. BU admits that loyalty rewards are a scam. Companies participating in the scheme can offer app users incentives to opt in, as well as loyalty rewards or discounts on particular items they may be interested in. The backend uses an open REST API for companies to integrate it with their facial recognition systems. Good admits facial recognition is about creating a national biometric database. China, India, Russia, parts of Latin America, and Japan have been using centralized biometric databases for a long time. So if they've been doing it, well, why shouldn't we be doing it? Oddly, or perhaps by design, there is no mention of retailers creating facial recognition watch lists. So what is their master plan? Tripp revealed that retailers are planning on a gradual expansion of facial recognition. The BU article goes on to say that retailers have been slowly installing facial recognition in back-of-house deployments, which builds familiarity not only with retailers, but with staff as well. This article ends on a disturbing note. The infrastructure, in this case, is people's perspective. That can change quickly. Our perspectives have better change, or corporate America will buy everyone's identity using rewards programs, the ability to skip check-in lines, convenience, discounts, price, luxury, you name it, there you go. That's the future. You see, once they eradicate a certain amount of people, right? And once the topography has been changed and people have been moved off of the land in places like Northern California, then the next step is to essentially put them into the Agenda 21 environments. And in the Agenda 21 environments, everything will be biometric, everything. So the war that's taking place is ultimately part of a herding that's going on. And the herding has to do with not just physical herding and redistricting of where we live. It's the type of lifestyle that we've been living for a very long time. But it's also a war on our consciousness, and it's a war on our minds, and it's a war on our spirits. And I've talked about this before, particularly last week when I talked about the quality of being demoralized and how important it is to not be demoralized, especially during times like these. It's very, very easy to look around and see that the world is beginning to unravel, and it is unraveling. This is part of the deconstruction process. And the deconstruction process, in some ways, cannot be fully guided or directed. There are too many variables that are in place. You know, order ab chao, out of chaos order, right? I mean, this is what we think they think that they can do, and reassemble all this into the Agenda 21, Agenda 2030 worlds that they've got sort of planned out. Not even sort of, they are planned out. But that's not necessarily the case. It's you know, we are free radicals, and we are the variables. We are the things that can't be completely programmed or can't be completely accounted for, even though they would like to to get into us, to get inside of us, whether it's through the food we eat or the air we breathe or the media we consume, and then begin to contour and shape and manipulate our consciousness, manipulate how we respond or how we react, so that ultimately, we'll move towards some new model that's being constructed for us. But there's something about being human. There's something about kind of who we are in this time that I don't necessarily think corresponds to that model. And it's not going to show up on headlines on, the New York Times or the Austin Statesman or whatever. But I can tell you there are people that you like. I'll give you an example, okay? The other night we were having a meeting for the fluoridation, getting the fluoride out here. And there's a woman at the meeting. She's local German. She owns a spa, and she'd been to the previous meeting, and we were talking about 5G. And boy, she picked right up on it. After we talked about 5G the last time she got on the internet, she looked at 5G and she was like, this is horrible. And we talked about the calcification of the pineal gland due to fluoride, and she was all over that. This is what's happening. I want to be clear, we are waking up. And this is a really important process. And we don't necessarily know where it's going to go. We can't predict it. And waking up isn't all. Waking up is a process. It's not a destination, but I think it's a really important one. And humans are pretty resourceful, and we can be pretty radical and pretty inventive and clever. And I actually believe that those are the qualities that are going to get us through these times. And it's important to understand what's going on. There is something big happening. There's something really big happening, and we can see it, and it just feels like it's gotten taken to another level. That's what I'm picking up on. The world as we know it on this day, the 16th of November, is nothing like the world on the 16th of November in 2017. It's just not. And where we're going to be in 2019, a year from now, probably very different as well. But one thing is constant, and that constant is that people are waking up. That's a constant. And there were a number of people that woke up in 2017. Speaking of woke up, look who just woke up from his nap. And there are a number of people that are waking up now, and the number is going to increase. Isn't that right, Jasper? The number is going to increase. And if you're in the chat room, you're part of it. Don't lose faith, okay? This is a really critical, special, important time to be alive. And it may seem crazy, surreal, but I'm telling you, we've never seen anything like this. And we may be up against some real technological Goliaths. I mean, this doom energy stuff is pretty sophisticated, and probably just the tip of the iceberg, to be honest with you. But we're here. We're here now, and we're here for a reason. And this is the ultimate test. It's the ultimate spiritual test, and it's the ultimate sort of test for the evolution of our consciousness. Right, Jasper? Yeah. Jasper meets the test every day just by waking up. That's right. All right, let me check in with you in the chat room. See what you guys are doing in there. Jasper will let me. See what's going on. The old chatterama. Let's see. You have 15 people watching, is that it? Yeah. It's hardly anybody. Why does Trump want to go to Venezuela? Well, Maduro's a wild card, and there's oil in Venezuela. That's why. Oil's going to become a big deal very quickly. Let's see. I was also thinking up in the ante because they know people. Absolutely, Ani. They are waking up. Let's see what else. Let's see. California is the new New Orleans. Yep. And you're 10 minutes away from being wetware. Could be. Absolutely. So I guess we got a little bit of a small turnout today, huh? Oh, well, that's the way it goes. All right, listen, I'm going to be back here on Sunday night, and we're going to get into the cosmos. 90 people. Oh, great. That's awesome. It says 15 here. I must be way behind. Hey, I just want to say thank you to the people that donated to the cause, and really want to, I was doing some shout outs, but people were pretty private, I think. So you know who you are, you donated, and I really appreciate it. So very helpful to keep this thing going. This and the readings, of course. And I am still doing readings, by the way. So that's, of course I'm doing readings, what I do for a living. So thank you for the donations. And we'll be back on Sunday nights. Just keep the faith, okay? You just got to keep the faith, and find allies and hang in there, and get to know who's around you, and really try to wrap your head around the fact that that this is a process, and we're gonna be going through one of the greatest transitions we've ever seen. Whether it's the singularity and what's happening with the AI, or whether it's something big and profound and spiritual, or maybe it's kind of a competing model for both. Like, it's here, it's on, and you're part of this experience, and you get to add to it in whatever way, shape, or form you can. And don't think that you don't count, or your thoughts don't count, or your feelings don't count. They do. They do. Absolutely. Especially when they're clear, when they're directed, and when they're coming from the center of your being. So, all right, I'm gonna end it right there. Jasper, you want to say anything? You came here late today, Jasper. Anything you want to say to anybody? Huh? You have anything you want to say to anybody? Just not. All right, you know the drill. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to stay open what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. This is Jasper Phoenix. And I'll see you guys on Monday night. Have a great weekend. And for all you folks in California, take care of yourselves. People are buying air masks, and man, just take care of yourselves. If you can, maybe get out for a few days. Go to Texas. Treat you to some barbecue. Have a great weekend.